Hey guys, this is James from TeaDB bringing you episode, InBetweenIsode rather, number 39. So, today, on popular demand, I'm doing something that I said I wasn't going to do because, the previous episode I talking about some Pu'erh resources, but people talked up and said they wanted to see some more reviews of white to tea teas. Still have a few samples left. So I figured, why not give the people what they want, so to speak. So I am reviewing two different teas today for episode number 39. The first one is the Colbert, and the second one is the Tuhao as F. So these two teas are both from Menghai County, or have a Menghai County character, because we're not focusing too much on regions here. And I like both teas. I like them both quite a bit. And so it's kind of interesting, because I really only started drinking Pu'erh very seriously, I'm going to talk while I infuse, about a year ago, when I did that first Iwu report. And I drank Pu'erh kind of on and off, but it's really hard to delve very deep into something without getting just like a ton of repetitions, and just frankly just thinking about it a whole lot. And so, as you get deeper and deeper, you just start to develop more and more personal preferences. And, I recently went back and forth, and I think some of my comments may have been slightly misinterpreted. But just to saying that, like, the things like the shroom or the, I haven't had it, but presumably the MCA, the milk, cream, and alcohol, just kind of go against my current taste. And that's not to say these teas won't age into something that I would find really tasty, just that they are difficult for me to enjoy right now, just because they tend to have like this more of a bitter harshness to it that I just find a little bit difficult to enjoy. And I'm largely in the minority there, and I think it also does speak towards my personal preferences. But these are two teas from Menghai County that I do enjoy a good deal. So this is literally finishing off my Colbert sample. And I preheated my vessel and rinsed it beforehand. So the aroma started very, I guess it kind of had like this marshmallow-like sweetness, which is kind of a Denny analogy, so to speak. But it's become a little bit more green/vegetal in the last couple. And I found this tea had a really interesting character, and in the few sessions I've had with it, it was a very dynamic sort of tea. But here is first infusion. Cheers, guys. So immediately, it has a good thickness in the mouth. Some of these teas need a little bit of time to thicken up and stuff, and this may thicken up even more. This is not those teas. The first infusion, definitely pretty full in the mouth. And it starts out really sweet at the start of it, but then it develops in this interesting way, and has this sort of like really interesting bitterness at the finish. And it'd be interesting to actually, thinking out loud, to compare this to Crimson Lotus's Slumbering Dragon, because I remember that tea also having a really interesting sort of take on the bitterness at the end, a very specific bitterness. And this is not something that I encounter all that often, so it is interesting in that sense. So this second infusion, I think I did infuse it for a little bit longer. So as I wait for that to cool down in a hot second, that will probably inform how I want to do this third infusion. So we'll wait for just a second here. So on the tip of the tongue, it's really has a very pleasant, just sweet character to it. I wouldn't describe it as particularly fruity. It's very sort of like soft in the mouth at the initial part, and sort of that bitterness, which is very different than, for instance, the bitterness from the green shroom, lingers, and it kind of like stays in sort of like the cheeks of the mouth. Really good. In fact, I would say that this infusion was, if anything, a little bit even sweeter than that first one, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to try to go to about 4 infusions, 4 or 5, which really doesn't do the tea enough justice, but it's going to have to be good enough for now. I'm also now noticing some Pu'erh and just like sweetness that's sort of like in the back of the mouth right now. I haven't noticed this being like a overly throaty tea, and we'll talk a little bit more about that once I move on to the Tuhao, which has a very different character, and I probably enjoy that tea a little bit more. It is also a little bit more expensive. So it's sort of like, I'd say it has sort of a very similar aroma to the last steep, and maybe the addition of maybe a little bit of nuttiness. Some of these teas are very dynamic, so they're very fun to session. Go ahead and steep this as well. And the leaves have just like fully expanded to fill up the gaiwan fully. That nuttiness, sweet nuttiness, has kind of gone into the tea a little bit more. Very green leaves. I guess that's probably pretty obvious for a young Pu'erh. So it hits your tongue, and then you kind of like let it sit in your mouth, and there's like a really nice soft texture that happens. The sweetness is not fruity. It's, I guess, if anything, it's sort of like cotton candy / sugary. The thickness in the mouth has lessened a little bit, and I think you could attribute that to a little bit of just like the steep time. What I found in this tea is that sort of like interesting bitterness, astringency on the end starts to take over a bit for some of these middle steeps, but if you keep going, if you go to like steep number 7, steep number 8, it goes away, and you can sort of have your way with the tea, so to speak, and push it a little bit more, get out some of those more interesting sweet notes, and stuff like that. I'm going to keep drinking. So, really interesting combination of bitterness and sweetness right now. Tuhao has a decent aroma as well. You know, this infusion, it's not thin, but it started to thin out a bit. And the bitterness is also not quite as strong, so it leads me to believe that for the next subsequent infusions, I could push this a little bit more, go to maybe 20 seconds, 25 seconds, something like that. Yeah, in terms of like mouthfeel in the mouth, just the whole front of my mouth really has a lot of just stuff going on right now, a lot of buzzing, a lot of just feel all over. My cheeks are definitely starting to feel flushed. I'm starting to sweat a bit. So yeah, I definitely enjoy this tea. I don't think it's a tea that I'm going to personally buy, but it's definitely a fun tea for me to sample, and I wouldn't fault anyone at all for picking up a cake of this. So I'm back for the second part of episode 39. So now we are talking about the Tuhao. So real quickly before I jump into that, I'm going to infuse this. I've rinsed it already a couple times off the screen, so as not to bore you guys. But real quickly, there's a couple important things just about like doing these back-to-back sessions, in the sense that your palate just is not the same as it is when in the first session of the day. So it's important to know that, especially if you're making any sort of purchasing decision based off of that. So basically what I did is I just walked around my living room for a little bit, drank some water, and just kind of noted how my mouth felt after the Colbert, because that tea definitely had sort of like a significant effect. So Scott of Yunnan Sourcing, I think in the interview that just got published actually yesterday, talks a lot about just like, or he talks about like a common tea shop technique to trick you, where they will basically brew a stronger tea with like strong mouthfeel and stuff, and then maybe switch to something a little bit lighter and try to, and that's the tea they want to sell, the tea they want to push. So something weaker, but you'll still be tasting that first tea, and it will end up tricking you. Alright, so Tuhao, if you guys don't know what it is, it's basically like the nouveau rich of China, so people trying to be cultured, supposedly, that kind of thing, go into Laobanjiang or and buying lots of real/fake, probably fake leaves. Laobanjiang, of course, is super famous. Look it up on Babblecarp. Lots of fakery, tomfoolery in general, one of the most hyped regions, so even if you get the real deal, you're spending a lot of money to get it. So this tea makes no such claims of being legitimate Laobanjiang, but it's Two Dog's attempt at creating something that sort of fits that profile. So it's got a lower, a little bit more, less green profile to it, I would say, and that's not to say it's not like properly green as a Pu'erh. It's just a little bit less vegetal, and more maybe earth/base. So this tea does sell for not quite twice as much as the Colbert, but it is significantly more expensive. I think it is about $140 for 200 grams. So it will be interesting to compare this directly with a tea that's a little bit cheaper. Alright, cheers. There's a very slight sort of like acorn bitterness, I would say, at the very beginning of this. It's not super big yet, but what you can feel is you can feel the liqueur. There's a much clearer throatiness to it, and you can sort of feel it go all the way into the chest, and then you can feel it sort of rise, and then eventually you start to salivate, and you have sort of this returning sweetness. I think that's going to get a lot more pronounced as we steep it out. The leaves, I should also note, look a lot smaller than the Colberts, or maybe not a lot smaller, but they are smaller than the Colberts. And I'll push that for 10 seconds, just to open it up a little bit. So it's really started to just fill up the whole gaiwan. I would say it has an overall more intense aroma, and I may have spoke too soon about it not smelling super green. It does smell a little bit greener now at this point. And you know, tea is a really difficult thing to sort of describe, but and I don't know, you could place it here or there, and I mean, like Scott talks about it just being a sort of like the energy you get from the leaves, but this has a very particular energy coming off of it, where it's just, and I like Marshall's definition, where it's like sort of like flowing through your body that just makes you feel generally good, and I get that a lot more pronounced off of a tea like the Tuhao as opposed to something like the Colbert. A lot of sweetness just right there in the throat. It's really filled in the body and the mouth. It's big, but it's also soft and very palatable, so very easy for me to drink. It still has some of that bitterness, which will probably stay with the tea, but the bitterness is very manageable in the tea. It's not overly bitter. You don't have to force that bitterness in order to get appropriate thickness. Reheat that water real quick. Get a leaf in my mouth. So it sort of like creates this interesting lump at the top of the throat, and then you can feel it go all the way down. The taste, which I haven't talked about much, is sort of like a very characteristic, I would say, sort of like floral bitterness. I've noticed a similar taste in like the Boulong Beauty that Tea Urchin sells. Just a lot of teas in general. Even some of the cheaper ones like the Shroom that White Tea sells sometimes. In terms of mouth lingering, you know, it's a little bit hard to differentiate from the Colbert. I do notice a lot of the front of the mouth stuff again. My throat has significantly more feel, which I was definitely not getting from the Colbert. In terms of my personal preference, I don't think it's particularly close at all. I strongly prefer the Tuhao. I just think it has a lot more attributes, and sort of getting that floral, slightly, I don't know, brown sugary smell to this, and I am really starting to sweat. So, has that nice softness. Yeah, still plenty of bitterness that is lingering in the mouth. And with these teas, it's just, I don't know, once you get through that, it's nice to be able to push it quite a bit. And I think I am really starting to feel the tea. So I'm going to drink this steep and probably call it right there. Alright, wait for that to cool down. Yeah, so let me know what you guys would like next. I was thinking of maybe reviewing the Little Walk. If you're tired of all this white tea reviews, if you'd like to see something different, or if you'd like to see me review a few more of the line, I'd like to, the few more that I'd probably do are the Little Walk, the Bosch, and the Last Thoughts. And I'm definitely doing the Last Thoughts, so no matter what you guys say, you guys are all like, no, I don't want to see Last Thoughts, I don't care. I'm going to do it on the show anyways as an InBetweenIsode. Yeah, let me know what you guys want to see next. Cheers. So, the bitterness is the most obvious thing with this tea, but good tea is not really about having that bitterness, it's about how that bitterness sort of transforms, especially for these young raw Pu'erhs. And this one transforms into lots of great stuff. just a really quick rising sweetness. The parts where the bitterness lingers are sort of like at the front of the mouth, but sort of at the back of the mouth, in the throat. That just feels awesome right now. Yeah, so this is a tea I would definitely recommend people check out. It has a really strong energy. I'm sweating everywhere right now. I'm going to need to go change. I'm going to need to go shower. But it's a really delicious tea, and I think it's a good way to sort of like get a good profile on what all the hype is about these supposedly super hot regions. So I would definitely recommend picking up a sample as opposed to blind buying it, just to see if this taste is for you. It's very intense, and you know, some people may not like the same attributes that I like. I know that I've really begun to develop specific personal preferences as I've got more and more into tea. So you may not have the same taste as mine. But I thank you guys for all watching this long, meandering episode at this point, and I will see you guys next week.